Well, my name is Derozette Banks. I am a mother of 5 amazing kids. I am a pastor at Overcomer Covenant Church. I enjoy pageants, I enjoy traveling, and I enjoy impacting people's lives. I was conceived in Louisiana, and my father was a military man who suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome, although they didn't have a word for it back then. So he was very volatile, and when he drank, he was very violent. So my mom had to deal with a man who had some mental illness, but also was an alcoholic. And when she was pregnant with me, he attacked her with a knife. That was the last thing that happened, that she decided she had to get out of that relationship. So she left, and no one knew where she was. So she came to California, and I was born in California, raised in first Watts, and then moved up to Compton. And so I grew up in the inner city where gangs were forming. There was a lot of drugs and substance abuse, and it was a tough environment. You know, I didn't know, especially with my biological father, I didn't know there was a part of me missing until I was in my 30s and my mom found a picture. And it just blew me away to see a half of me that I knew nothing about. What happened did have an impact, because when my stepfather and my mom would fight, I would hide knives. And I think that's so interesting that my mom was attacked by my father with a knife, and with my stepfather, I hid knives. And so that maybe subconsciously affected me, but I didn't realize I was missing something until I got older, and I watched my husband with my own children, and I began to understand that father figure, that understanding of what a daddy was, I was missing. So I didn't know I had anything to forgive until I got older. It was interesting. It was interesting for me because a lot of people judged me because of the way I looked. Back then, light skin, long hair, you thought you were cute, you thought you were better than everybody else. I was such a tomboy. So if anybody said anything, I was ready to fight. So meet me in the girls' bathroom. But I had teachers that took interest in me. And so when I even thought about veering off, and I think it was the providence of God, when I thought about veering off, principals, teachers, all of them saw something in me that I didn't realize was there, but I knew that there was something different about me. I was a dreamer, so I was always thinking, and I was always imagining, and I was always dreaming, and I was always thinking I could do that. There was something inside of me, but it was tough in that the fact that I saw people that I loved, that I was friends with, that maybe in junior high or high school, we started having divergent paths. I think that was at the age that I first received Jesus into my life. And I always was God conscious, but I didn't know that I could actually have a relationship with Him. We met on a blind date. He was playing professional football. I had competed the night before for Miss California USA, and I had just rededicated my life. At the age of 19, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and given a 1 in 3 chance of survival. So, it's funny because I was just reading about the type of chemotherapy that I had gone through, and it was a radical version. But and it's interesting that you can walk through that, and God can walk you through that, and you can still turn away from the Lord. Because at 21, I was back partying, back hanging with friends that party. And that night before I met Gordon, I had rededicated my life to the Lord. I was so tired of the cycle. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be something other than somebody that didn't know where they wanted to go. And he turned on the TV and saw them calling my name for the top 10. And he called his friend and said, "Bring her. I'm going to leave the tickets in her name." And so they couldn't get there unless I came. And so they showed up at my doorstep because I didn't want to meet him. I think it was a fear. I had never seen a successful marriage. He proposed to me 6 months after we met because he knew that I was his wife. I didn't know. Nobody told me. He says it was about 5 times that I told him no. I was afraid. I had never seen a successful marriage. I was a musical theater major. I wanted to pursue singing or acting. And I knew that with him playing professional football, that I would be dedicated to his profession. And I wasn't sure I wanted to do that. And so I think it was fear that kept telling me no, because I was afraid that maybe I couldn't be dedicated to one man, because I wasn't. I dated guys and I cheated on guys. So I think it was at a point where I was just miserable without him. He was in Texas. He had signed with the Cowboys. I was miserable without him. And so I said yes, and we planned our wedding in 3 weeks. At the age of 19, when I didn't have any children and had no desire to have children, I was told that I probably wouldn't ever have children because of the damage of the chemotherapy. And then all our ministry to children, and then first volunteering in the nursery when we didn't have any children. You know, I never followed that path in seeing what we've done, but we loved kids. You know, Gordon, my husband, really loved kids. He's like a kid magnet. And when we met, I told him that I possibly wouldn't be able to have kids. And he said, "Well, I love kids." And he prayed for me. And it was a simple prayer: be fruitful, multiply. And we didn't make it a year. And I got pregnant on one ovary. And I think it's interesting because my husband is the only natural born child from his father, who died a month before he was born. They had adopted 2 children from Korea, and then she found out she was pregnant. And then he had an accident at work, and he was gone. And he was the only child. So there was no natural son to carry on the bank's name. And I think it's interesting that not only do I have 5 children, I have 4 boys to carry on the bank's name. I think that's redemption. Also, he died January 26th. I was born on January 26th. So he talks about how, although that was the day that his father died, we still celebrate it to this day because it means life, and God is redemption. So 5 kids later. You know, we've always loved Jesus, and we always wanted to share that. So even when Gordon was playing professional football, we would go to these little towns in Texas and go to youth group and go to these small churches. He only had 1 day a week off, and we find ourselves going all over. We started a nonprofit called Banks Bunch, where we we took these kids that were in the foster care system, and we brought them into the Cowboys camp, and we had players share with them. We gave them lunch, and then on our own dime, we took them to the game the next day. We were always trying to impact people's lives. And to this day, we have 2 letters that these kids have written to Gordon. And one was from a young girl saying, because of my life, I didn't believe that there was a God. I was an atheist. But because of your kindness and what you've done for me, I know that there is a God. I was in 7th grade, and I saw this paper advertisement for the Miss Sugar Ray Robinson pageant. And the way that you entered it is you wrote a paragraph. And so I got a friend to help me write a paragraph, and I was selected. And we had talent, and we learned how to walk, and it was for underserved girls. It was fun. It took me out of my environment, and it showed me something different. It showed me that there were people in my community that wanted to make a difference, and it exposed me to that. So that was my first experience. And then after that, there was no other opportunity. And I used to watch the Teen USA and the Miss America, and I didn't often see girls that looked like me. But it didn't matter because I was a dreamer. And so I would always say, one day I'm going to do that. And so while I had friends that were choosing drugs, and some of them were becoming members of gangs, I started pursuing or finding a way to enter into pageants. And my first one, I didn't do anything. My second one, I won Miss South Los Angeles, and then that's when I competed for the Miss USA, California USA. And then I did the Miss America line because I sang, so I had a talent. And I'm telling you, I learned so much about how to communicate. I learned a lot about discovering who I was as a person and what I wanted from life. And that's what I love about pageants. It forces you to know yourself, because you have to interview, you have to sell yourself. And if you don't know who you are, you can't convey that. And so that's the reason why I compete in pageants. Even today, 57, mother of 5. I'm Miss South King County. I'm competing in the Mrs. Washington America pageant. And the reason why I chose that system is because it's all about community service and impacting women's lives. One thing that I had somebody come into my environment and lead me out and expose me to other things. I didn't find a way out myself. So I'd like to go into an environment where young girls of color who may not consider doing a pageant, or they don't understand the value in what they can learn from the experience of competing in a pageant, and show them that value, show them the things that they can learn, help them challenge themselves, come out of their comfort zone. One thing that I would always say, I was actually asked one time, how do you feel about being the only woman of color? And I said to the judge, I said, I have your attention because I'm different. Now it's left up to me to perform well, to keep your attention. You know, one of my favorite scriptures is in Jeremiah, when God is talking to him because he's called to be a prophet of the nations. And God says to him, I knew you before you were woven or formed in your mother's womb. And what that speaks to me is that God knew our purpose. And because he knew our purpose, he had to weave together our being. And in the DNA of our being are those dreams, those goals, that call, that purpose. And so I think a lot of times our calls, our calling are the dreams that we have, the aspiration. And sometimes we kind of go all over the place because it hasn't been refined. And so if I really look at the things that I dreamt about, the things that I wanted to achieve, I was always dreaming about being a trailblazer, a forerunner. And if I really follow my career, that's exactly what I am. I forge a path for people to follow. I go into the presence of God and then say, come on, come along with me. I think first of all, I have to talk about 3 years of depression where I couldn't get up in the morning, or I put them in front of a TV and got up thinking about going back to bed. I was alone. It was dark. I didn't see any hope. The person that I was no longer there. And I know that there are moms out there that suffer with that depression. And I didn't know that it was postpartum depression. Because not only were we having children, we were broke as dirt. So we were struggling financially. We were in between jobs. And it seemed like we were at the bottom. And so, you know, all those things compounding. And I think I would want to say, number one, talk. Number two, get some help. Number three, realize that you're not alone. Isolation is a big problem with women who are dealing with depression. And but I think it's God began to show me that depression is inward thinking. So I was so overwhelmed with what was happening in my life, and that was my world. And the Lord said, I want you to open up your world, and I want you to think outwardly. And so I started doing things for other people. And one of the things that he told me to do every morning is to open up all my windows and let light come in. And I started doing that. And then he gave me little things, little steps to walk out. And then he told me, clean your kitchen, because it was the focal point of my home. And so if every other house, room in the house was chaotic, my kitchen was ordered. And actually, that's where the Lord would speak to me the most. And as I walked out of that, and I have 5 kids, 5 different personalities, 5 strong wills. I just, the Lord just taught me that I was the anchor. And so if I was moved or I was reactionary, then they were reactionary. And if I just responded, then they would have peace. I remember my daughter would throw tantrums on the floor, and it would just throw me off. And the Lord asked me, why are you giving that 2-year-old such power? She's not old enough to wield the power of moving you to react. He says, stop reacting. So the last time she throws herself on the floor, I just look at her and step over. She stops. I said, wow, I didn't know I had that kind of power. The family entity is a prime example that our stories are all connected. Whether we're related by blood or related by relationship or just in friendship, our stories are all intertwined because our stories impact someone else's life. And really, I heard this said once, that our stories are not for ourselves. Our stories are to be shared, and then the value or the nuggets or the wisdom from our stories impact someone else, and they take your story and it becomes part of their stories. And so I think, with my kids, they're all growing and they're all learning and they're all walking their own lives. The best thing that I can do is be their biggest cheerleader, a voice of wisdom, because I'm a little bit older than them and I've lived a little life. And I moved from parenting to coaching or to mentoring. And sometimes that's a tricky kind of dynamic to slip into. But I think we have to as parents, if we want to continue to bring value to our own children's stories. I think it's important for us to turn around and look at where we've come from, because it's very difficult to know where we're going if we don't know where we've been, and then find the value. I've often been asked a question: if there's one thing that you can change in your life, what would that be? When I look back, it would be nothing, because everything that I've gone through has come together to forge who I am today. And I think I've learned the value of what I call hiccups or mistakes. And I've learned to take those mistakes and stop burying them, but yet set them out so they can be a step up, that I learn from them. When we begin to understand that our story it's not an accumulation of things that have happened to us, but it's things that we've experienced, and some things that we've overcome, and some things that we've learned from, then those things in our story become facets. And if we look at a diamond, the brilliance of a diamond comes from the facets or the cut. If there's multiple cuts or multiple facets, the light that is within or that reflects on that diamond is brilliant. I think if we understand that our stories are what makes us unique, what sets us apart, what makes us brilliant when we walk into a room of people that we deem honorable, or somebody that we wish we could be like, when we accept our own story, we accept our own brilliance. I think what I really want people to know is that I care, and that everything that I do is motivated by that. I serve my community because I care. I pastor because I care. I travel to Cambodia to rescue little girls from trafficking because I care. And I'm not sure if it's that I care or that God cares through me. If I have done everything perfect, which I know I haven't, and I don't change someone's life, I don't help them see the value in who they are or the value in their story, then I fail. And I love God, and I try to live according to His principle so that my light, which is His light through me, lets the world know that God cares and He cares through me. My name is Derozette Banks, and this is my story. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today. Please subscribe for more stories like this one.